once again, and as always it's a privilege to be able to speak to you, because over the years the Society has provided so much information for the industrial historian, and I am truly thankful for it. My particular thanks to Mary for inviting me back for a third year running. After this you probably won't have me again. We won't want me again anyway. Now we're going to have a look at the Royal Arsenal's remains. That's the principal topic tonight. The talk was originally devised as a short presentation for Barclay Group, the redevelopers of the westernmost part of the Royal Arsenal. That was given around about 18 months ago. Various members of the Royal Arsenal Woolwich Historical Society were present, and they asked me to give an amended and expanded version to themselves, which I did just over a year ago. It is, of course, an enormous subject, and I do warn you, I'm going to have to go on and on and on, and I am going to be struggling to fit this within the hour. In fact, I won't quite make it. It's not possible to do it. Before I do it, I must offer some people their acknowledgements. So I'd like to acknowledge English Heritage for use of some photographs from the historic Aerofilms Library, the Royal Arsenal Woolwich Historical Society, particularly through Ray Fordham, for the use of some photographs, Greenwich Heritage Centre, Barclay Group, particularly Ashley Lovell and Simon Winson, and more locally, Don Tidy, Chris Waite and Stephen Peterson. Pleased that Stephen is here this evening. Right, we'll get on with it. You've seen this map before. The way we're going to work this is to start at the east and we're going to work to the west, and we're going to do it more than once. We're going to start out looking at what the Arsenal used to look like, and then we're going to have a look at what the Arsenal nearly looked like, and then we're going to have a look and see what it looks like today and what remains of the Royal Arsenal. I can't do everything. You'll find gate posts, manhole covers, whatever, but we're only going to do the more significant sections. Right, okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Right, here's the Royal Arsenal. You've seen this map before, 3¼ miles long, 1½ miles across, roundabout, 2 square miles of land, 1,100 buildings, over 80,000 employees, 147 miles of railway, over 100 locomotives in steam at any one time, and perhaps more to the point, 450 years of operational history. There was never a factory like it, and we were completely dependent on it. We quite literally would not be here today if it weren't from the output of this factory. Location of the Arsenal, southeast England. You can just see it right at the top, a little red blob. You can see its advantages and why Britain put all of its eggs in one basket when it came to defence. It's because it's far enough up the Thames to be immune from naval bombardment, yet it has the advantage of deep water. Almost any ocean-going ship could reach it, even today. It also had other advantages such as the Kent iron industry, very important at the time that the Arsenal was founded, and also close proximity to the naval dockyards at Deptford, Woolwich, Sheerness, Chatham and Harwich. All very handy. Let's move in a little bit further. Southwest London, southeast London, getting larger, a little bit more detailed. Here we are again, and at this point I normally give a potted history of the Arsenal. I'm not going to do that tonight because I've given it to you before and there isn't time. So instead we're going to look at something very important, which is the physical aspects of the Arsenal. And this is important to us. This is a geological map of the Royal Arsenal. This sort of area up here. And you'll notice that to the south it's bounded by hills which are made out of chalk, which are porous and which are covered with, intersected by dry river valleys. The high ground to the left is clay, that's Shooter's Hill. The rest of it though is a marsh, and that's important to remember throughout the talk. The marsh area was first embanked roughly along the course of the River Thames in about 900. Perhaps they thought they were going to get nice polder land. The work was done by people from the Netherlands. They didn't get nice polder land. Good evening. The reason they didn't get nice polder land, because once they kept out the river, they no longer had a brackish marsh, they had a freshwater marsh, because these porous hills act as a reservoir and the area is constantly wet. It's still wet today, it still requires constant pumping today. Here you can see one principal river valley, that is the valley of the mythical River Plum. And we'll see where the River Plum came out at the other end by the Thames a little bit later on. Back to the arsenal. This is the remnants of the Plum, just here, that marsh there, and that inlet there, which the arsenal used as a cordite burning ground. That's where it disposed of unwanted ammunition, in particular the high explosive propellant for more modern munitions, cordite, an invention of the arsenal by Sir Frederick Abel. This is a photograph taken by Aerofilms in either 1931 or 1932. They're actually trying to photograph Barking Power Station on the other side of the river. But, thankfully, they had a very good quality camera, and it's possible to take a tiny strip off the top of that photograph and obtain what is probably, almost certainly, the finest overall view of the eastern end of the arsenal that has ever been made. We can see in the background the line of the southern outfall sewer that delineates the arsenal. Here you've got Crossness Pumping Station and its village surrounded by trees. You can see both the chimneys of Crossness Pumping Station here, and various features in the foreground from the arsenal. We're going to zoom in on this. Firstly, to look at the left-hand side of this photograph, then we're going to work to the west. So in we go, and here we are. What we see here, Crossness Pier, the high explosives handling pier, constructed in 1907, and possibly the only photograph of it in existence, Land's End Powerhouse. Land's End Powerhouse was a hydraulic power station. Its purpose was to feed the cranes on Crossness Pier. At that time it wasn't safe to use electricity for handling high explosives, too many sparks. You'll notice there's a chimney here, and next to it we have a hydraulic accumulator. The rest of the buildings and structures are magazines, all magazines. Most of them are moated magazines, like this one here, but there are later magazines, such as that one there, which we will look at closely in a moment. The later ones were built in the First World War. These ones date from between 1903 and 1907. Some of them were built before the military owned all of this land, and consequently they have some defensive features. They have a moat, also very handy for firefighting purposes, and particularly a wall around them. None of the other arsenals none of the arsenal's later magazines did have walls, because by that time the arsenal owned all the land. Let's move a little bit further to the west, and here we see the large Royal Naval Armaments Department depot. Large single-storey building, ridge roofs. This is typical of the eastern end of the arsenal. None of the buildings were particularly high. Note again, more magazines in the marshes. These marshes were used during arsenal days for hay, and haymaking was in fact commercialised here. It was sold off to farmers afterwards. Quite a big business, in fact. I said we'd have a look at one of those magazines. This is it. This is F102. It's quite close to the site of Crossness Pumping Station, actually, or it was. It wasn't very old at this time. It was photographed in about 1936. It had been built probably in 1916, 1917, like that. And it's a typical example. It's got lightweight roofs and very strong sides surrounded by an embrasure around about 20 foot high. Inevitably there is a railway connection. Right, back to another view going west. We're moving over to the west now. This is from another series of photographs taken of Barking Power Station. It's not a very good photograph, but it does show just here the cordite burning ground, the former mouth of the River Plum, and rather more crucially up here, the firing range. Now the firing range, you can see there, looks a little bit like a runway. It's got some structures at the end of it, a wall, an earthen mound, and there another one of the moated magazines. The distance covered by this photograph between the line up here, the southern outfall sewer, and the Thames embankment along here, is actually in the region of half a mile, so you can see how compressed that photograph is from this very low angle. Let's expand it a little bit. Again, it is really pretty blurred. They weren't trying to photograph this, but here's the cordite burning ground in the foreground, Motin magazine, and here a large earthen wall behind the target wall of the firing range here. Further to the west, and we see two of the Arsenal's largest establishments. To the left, the Lyddite factory, and here the composition establishment. Now the Lyddite factory was built in 1903 on the site of an inlet. This was completely overwashed by the Thames at every high tide, and the sea wall originally went inland like that. This inlet was filled up to quite a level. You can notice that there's quite a lot of high ground here. Let's zoom in on it to get some detail. Here we are. This is the Lyddite factory. It comprises of 3 deep trenches within the Maid Hill, and within those trenches you have the various high explosive producing buildings. They're in those trenches for safety purposes. The idea is that if there is an explosion, the trench will contain the explosion. In the background, more hills, all man-made, and there's an entrance into one of them. That's what's known as the Kunisberg Tunnel. There were quite a few of these. The Arsenal had underground magazines inside those hills, some of which are quite large. Looked a little bit reminiscent of underground stations on the inside. And the name Kunisberg, by the way, is a little bit of a laugh, but it's based on the name of W.R. Kunis, the well-known lighterage company in this part of the Thames. We're going to move to the right now and have a look at the composition establishment. Here we are. You see, it's made out of very many small brick buildings. We'll get a much better look at it later on, but very briefly, all these buildings are very small. Each one of them is actually manufacturing shells. It's not manufacturing shells, they're already finished. They're filling the shells with lyddite, which is a crystalline, yellow crystalline material, trinitrophenol, and then they are also fitting fuses and detonators. It's very dangerous work, and it required an enormous amount of hand labour. Tens of thousands of people worked in this establishment, and one thing that they had to be very careful about was absolute cleanliness. This is a chemical factory. Everybody needs to change into fresh clothes at every shift, and therefore the area's powerhouse is much more than a powerhouse. It's also the source for the laundry. Really important. It could be literally tens of thousands of uniforms to be washed every day. Right, on we go. Moving to the east, the west again. And this time, as you can see, we're over the Royal Docks. Aerofilms, nobody is allowed to overfly the Arsenal. Just after Blériot first flew to Britain from France, another Frenchman did the same thing, but he got a lot further, and he overflew the Arsenal. He didn't get a hero's welcome, he got arrested. He trespassed at high altitude over Crown property. Photography of the Arsenal was banned, aerial photography absolutely banned. But aerofilms nonetheless. We've got something in the bottom left-hand corner which is of use to us. It is the Arsenal's great crane up there to the top left, 200-ton capacity, the largest crane in the Port of London, and here 2 of the coaling piers. Now I notice that one of the 2 transporters is being rebuilt. Now they were rebuilt, and one of the gentlemen who took part in the rewiring told me that it was very useful when he was doing this, that he could raise or lower the jib to indicate to home whether he was ready for dinner or not. I'm told that this worked absolutely perfectly, and I know it's true. Down here you've got one of the Arsenal's gun-carrying barges, which we used to take guns for testing at the Yanklets Creek Gunnery Testing Station or at the Shoebury-Ness Ranges. They were roll-on, roll-off barges. You could pull a complete gun weighing way over 200 tonnes on its carriage out from that, or alternatively you could crane it on using the crane at the top. Let's move on a little further, because aerofilms have done us another favour. The Port of London Authority wanted these photographs taken in the 1950s to show how well they'd redeveloped the docks after the Blitz, and they had done a pretty tremendous job. But believe it or not, in the background, they've managed to capture what is one of the best aerial views of the industrial part, the intensely built up manufacturing area of the Royal Arsenal. We'll zoom in that at the moment, but just thinking about industrial history for a moment, everything on this side, except for a row of houses about here, and another one here, and the remains of a pub here, just about every building in here has gone. Nothing left at all. We'll zoom in now on the Arsenal. And that's the same photograph with the top layer taken off. You can see the line of the southern, the outfall sewer coming along here, Plumstead, around about there, and plenty of background, a bit too much background, so we'll zoom in and we'll start in this bit here. We'll get an idea of just how intensely built up with industrial premises this area was. This is the Royal Arsenal's Canal. Coming in here is the entrance lock, swing bridge there to carry the railway over it, the canal in the background, the Arsenal's first gasworks here. We'll see the second one in a minute. The coaling pier here, storage facilities for coal, numerous other factories, warehouses of every conceivable type doing every conceivable form of military manufacturing activity. We'll move a little further to the west, and here we have the great crane, the 200-ton crane again in the front, and this building here, the highest building in the Arsenal, known locally as the Northern Lights, and I believe it was building D81. I might be wrong, but I think I'm right. The purpose of that building, the reason it was so high, the highest building in the Arsenal, is because it had to be as high as the longest gun barrel was long. The gun barrels were lifted up on their ends, and then they were dipped into pits or wells which were full of various materials, everything from chromating solutions, sulfuric acid, or on occasions even oil, which they were dipped into whilst white hot to anneal them. Here is a hydraulic tower. The Arsenal had 4 of them in the main part of the industrial area. We need to think about that hydraulic tower again in a minute. We're now going to move further to the west, and this takes us right up to the end of it. Woolwich Power Station is about here, and most of the buildings in this photograph in the Arsenal survive today, and we'll be looking at them much more closely towards the end of the talk. That's taken us around the Arsenal from one end to the other at an aerial view no one else has seen before, but we haven't actually seen what it looked like from a human perspective. Note there the radial crane house. We'll come to that in a minute. So, aerial view of the Arsenal again in the early 1950s. And that little white square just there is the top of the hydraulic accumulator tower I mentioned a moment ago. We're going to get on top of that hydraulic accumulator tower and we're going to look around, see what we can see. So up we go. There we are. And to the right, the Arsenal's power station of 1907. It was built on an appendage of this older building here, which was demolished to build it. In the background, of course, Woolwich Power Station. And part of the Arsenal was in fact sold off in 1951 to give that a larger area for coal storage. Turning to our left, turning towards the south, a little bit more of the Grand Store here, the part of the Royal Gun Factory here. This is the Armstrong Gun Factory, that's the Shell Foundry, no longer with us. In the background, the central offices. We'll see all of these in more detail later. Further to the left, the chimney of the Shell Foundry, a bit more of the Armstrong Gun Factory, and there the serrated roofs of the Royal Carriage Department, which again we'll see more closely later on. Turning to the left further, we come to a gas holder. No, it's not a gas holder, but it probably was full of gas. This is the radial crane house, and it's well worth looking inside. It's always a good laugh to see this. There we are. That's the radial crane. This is the original one, built in 1867. A new one was fitted in 1937, but this one was more fun, it's much more elaborate and steam-powered rather than electrics. The idea was that a white-hot gun barrel would come in, one of the three jigs would pick it up and it would plunge it into an oil-filled well, about 200 foot deep. These tubes here are the tops of some of those wells. By plunging the white-hot gun barrel into the oil, you would anneal that gun barrel, you would get rid of the stresses within it, and you would give it a degree of rust-proofing as well. Overall, very good idea. Pretty much essential. The arsenal could not make its guns without this, and also D81, the other tempering building as well. Okay, very, very pleasant. And this would actually have been absolutely full, of course, of the exhaust coming out of the wells as the white-hot barrels were thrust into them. Back up onto our hydraulic accumulator tower, and we've turned right round. We're looking now towards the east. We can see the gasworks with the new retort house. This is after 1953. It's a vertical retort house. It was extraordinarily efficient. It really did command respect throughout the gas industry. Very, very good plant indeed. Out there, right at the top right-hand corner, you can see the area becoming more bucolic. We're looking out into the hay fields across the marsh. But do remember that all of this, including these buildings, are built on a marsh. In the background, towards the left, Barking Power Station, which was so kindly photographed for us a few minutes ago. Right, on we go. Back to the arsenal. We're back the arsenal map. We are going to use this map in various forms quite a lot to locate ourselves as we make our eastwards to westwards passes through the arsenal. I hope I've just given you an idea of what it looked like. It's very industrial, pretty dirty, and sometimes a place of frenetic workload, a tremendous output at all times. Let me just consult with my notes and make sure where I am. I'm doing all right at the moment. Let me move on to this. Okay, right, we move on to another map. Another map based on this one. Right, same thing, but this map shows what's built on the site of the Royal Arsenal today. Everything in red is a current building, and it's to dead scale. This is absolutely accurate. Take my word for it. I'm not lying. Even the width of the roads is accurate. The main roads are shown in pink, minor roads are not shown at all. The new drainage system, because it's always going to need a drainage system because of where it is shown in bright blue. The original drainage system is in pale blue. The thing that strikes me about this is that the buildings do not actually cover a very great proportion of the site. It looks very heavily developed, but if you take a second look at what is now Thamesmead, you will realise that it's a very leafy suburb. It's got a lot of open space in it, it's got a lot of trees in it, it's not the stuff of high intensity building, and therefore the arsenal can be said to have not perhaps been fully developed. There might be something left, you never know. On we go. These yellow sections show what areas of the arsenal would be recognised to an arsenal employable today. These parts of it would still look quite recognisable to somebody who was working there in, say, 1950. In the eastern end, that mainly means the magazines. As we move further west, it actually becomes buildings. We're now going to make our way from the east to the west, looking at these remnants. But firstly, we need to have a look, very briefly, at what nearly happened to the Royal Arsenal. The Lyddite factory, the composition establishment, the proof butts where guns used to be tested, and everything east of them was given to the London County Council in about 1962. One of the reasons for this was that there had been public concern about the amount of ammunition stored in the arsenal. It was around about 30 to 40,000 tonnes, and it was felt that this might not be appropriate in the capital city. So, that part of the arsenal was disposed of. The western end of it continued as a manufacturing area, but ammunition storage, ammunition manufacture were gone. to show us what nearly happened when the London County Council thought that they had got the greatest prize that they could ever have. We need to go up in the air and position ourselves over Ford's factory at Dagenham, which is off the top right-hand corner of this map, and have a look westwards. And we'll see something like that. It's the same thing, of course it's foreshortened, so from here up to about, well, a bit higher than I can point, is in fact only just a bit more than half the arsenal. So, you know, there is a foreshortening effect here. But nonetheless, it's suitable for our purposes. And note that red line. In fact, I'm going to pop back for a moment to the previous slide. And note that the red line is on that as well, and that there are houses floating in the river. Now, there aren't actually any houseboats in Thamesmead, but nonetheless, all will be revealed. Right, here we are, the arsenal as it was, as the London County Council got in 1962, with the red line in position. Let's put in a bit of background. Here's the Thames, now arrived. Entrances to the docks at the top, just about see a little bit of one of the coaling piers of Beckton Gasworks at the extreme right-hand side, and here the 1954 LCC Abbeywood Estate. Now, you may be familiar with what was intended for this. I don't think people who'd worked in the arsenal would ever have believed it, because it was going to look like this. This is the first proposal for Thamesmead, and it was made very, very rapidly. Only a matter of months elapsed between the time that the land was handed over to the LCC and this very complex and extremely high quality model was built. I wonder how they did it so fast. We'll come to that in a moment. But notice that they do retain various features. The magazines, still there. Crossness Pier, still there. And now you can see why they need to reclaim that land behind the red line. It is to give room for all these additional buildings. Now, these additional buildings are laid out in the, really, what's convenient for crane runs. They're what the LCC, or GLC by now, called linear housing. And the idea was that a factory would turn out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of identical or very similar concrete fabricated panels which would be connected to a crane, and they'd all be stuck together, a bit like Lego, and you would end up with this. In fact, you could have gone on ad infinitum. The result of this was the plans for this building, for instance, round here, which is very nearly 1.5 miles long, and it's 13 stories high. And there's another one up there. The only part of this to be built was this little row here. That's all that was ever built. Some of this as well. Just that bit. That's all. Why didn't they build the rest of it? It's because they got a sow's ear. They got a poison chalice, literally. This area was absolutely riddled with the results of very high intensity, high explosive manufacture, and all the components of it. Nitric acid, phenol, sulfuric acid, and of course the plant leaked. During the First World War there was no possibility of mending it, they just had to keep the production going. The result was that when they got this place, after they built this model, they found a pretty ferocious and very extensive underground fire, a constant exothermic reaction between the nitric acid and the sulfuric acid. The chap who lives round the corner from me is one of the engineers who actually ended up putting it out. They succeeded, but there was an enormous amount of polluted ground to be taken away. That polluted ground had to go somewhere. We'll see where it went in a minute. But the main thing was, such was the expense of clearing up the arsenal that they could never afford to build any of this. 13 stories, 1.5 miles high. Can you smell the urine in the lift wells? And as you walk along the walkways, perhaps you can feel the syringes crunching under your feet. It would have been a disaster. What a good thing it wasn't built. Okay, how did they come to these plans so quickly? The answer was very simple. Thamesmead was actually planned in 1955, but not here. I'll do that in a moment. quick look at the landfill which was done. Here's the original seawall. That's Margaret Ness or Tripcock Point up there. And this is the seawall that you walk along today. The outer part of the seawall is steel shuttering. The inner part of the seawall is a concrete wall, a solid mass concrete wall. The area between the two of them is where all the polluted soil went to. I wonder if it'll ever come out. Right, where are we? Saw the Thamesmead. Think about the southern part of Thamesmead that did get built. Could this be the extreme southwestern point of Southmere Lake? Doesn't look too dissimilar, does it? Well, it's not Southmere Lake, it's not Abbey Wood, it's not even South East London. These are the plans for the new town of Hook in Hampshire, which was planned in 1955 and very largely designed by a chap called Colin Lucas, who designed these high buildings here. In fact, he went on to build for the LCC 13 of them across London. The difference is that they're 25 stories high, and the ones in Thamesmead eventually could only be 13 stories high, because otherwise the upper floors would be in the plumes of the exhaust from Belvedere Power Station. Well, okay, there's one little bit of Hook that actually very nearly went into South East London. Here's another little bit of Hook with the latest buses of the day, 1955. Could that possibly be the western end of Yarnton Way? It's possible, it's not entirely dissimilar. And just over the road, of course, you have perhaps Tavy Bridge, formerly New Acres. It might just about be that. What is certain is we've already got these very distinctive angular roofs on these buildings and angular top panels on the concrete, which did in fact get built. There, Citroën DS there, latest car of the day, just what architects would want, nice and sleek. Yes. Well, anyway, that bit did get built in southwest London. The Arsenal bit didn't. Okay, back to our map of the Royal Arsenal, showing the surviving areas, the areas where you might find something. Real problem for the GLC. They'd run out of money. There was hardly any money to develop the part of Thamesmead that was going to be built on the Arsenal site. The southern part of it had ended up with a terrifically bad reputation as the result of the film Clockwork Orange, and they were finding it very, very difficult to keep Thamesmead going. As an area of municipal housing, it was pretty much a dead duck by this time. So the enterprising manager of Thamesmead, when he did get given a little bit of money, had a brainwave. Instead of building 100 or so houses, we will build an industrial scale concrete crushing plant. And into that concrete crushing plant, which was situated here in the proof butts, every building from here, up here, and right up to the end was fed in. Every one of them, no exception. Not one Arsenal building escaped the concrete crusher. Destroyed the lot. The only building from that era which survives is just round about there, something there about round about there. It's an entrance shaft into the power cable tunnel that goes over to Barking Power Station and was built in about 1933-34. That's the only building left that's earlier in this area. The concrete crushing plant. There we go. That's it. That's the back. That's the brick wall that supported the back of the proof butts. And here's the concrete crushing plant in action. These piles here are the former buildings of the Royal Arsenal. The other side of the road, still Royal Arsenal East, still military property. Quite a secret part of it as well. Lots of research and development in there. Turn around. Concrete crushing factory down here on the proof butt site. But key to our next little section, the site of Plumstead Bus Garage. Now, why is Plumstead Bus Garage yellow? Well, the reason it's yellow is because it's full of sand. Now, imagine that you've got to clear up the Royal Arsenal. It's full of ammunition, goes back decades. There's loads of it. People are picking it out of the ground. The army have already been over it, clearing it up once or twice, and there's still more coming up. You've got a problem. What can you do? Well, you can always put it underneath the carpet and hide it. And the way that they hid it was to pump the arsenal full of offshore dredged sand from the Thames estuary. The whole eastern end of the Royal Arsenal, all the way as far as the Arsenal's canal, is covered in sand. Varying depths, but all nice and smooth on the top, and you can build on it. Sand is a perfectly good foundation material as long as it doesn't drift away. It's actually very strong in compression. Well, here we see the eastern part of Thamesmead under construction. It's being done by private builders now. The GLC just put in the infrastructure, and we can see some of the magazines still surviving. This one here is now a nature reserve that's never open to the public, and this one is magazine L13 structure F52, which we'll have a closer look at now. You can still see the sand that hasn't been seeded yet all over the place. There we are. That's what a typical magazine looks like today. L15 F32, very nice. Screen chain walk goes right the way through the middle of it. Still see the outline of the moat, but the moat's been incorporated into the modern drainage system. The modern drainage system is higher than the original drainage system. It's made out of a series of concrete trays. It's only 1 foot deep. So when you go and see this, what you notice is that the earth and embankments just don't seem as high as they used to be, and that's because the land around it has risen up. It's not always the case, depends what part of Thamesmead you're in. So there we are, F53, and on to another, F52, and on to F53, it's near neighbour, which is better known as Tub 53. This is a nature reserve. This programme actually had a half-hour documentary made about it on Radio 4 just over a year ago. A programme called, oh dear, God, I've forgotten the name of it now. Should have known, I made the programme. Anyway, never mind. Right, a programme is on the iPlayer about this. It's on Thursday afternoons at 3 o'clock usually. It's a very good nature reserve now. Internally, except for the loss of the magazine, it's very much complete. So you've got an air raid shelter built into it, which is again very complete. Complete with sort of shelves and hooks for bunk beds and all this sort of thing inside it. It's also got its wall, which is in very good condition. Very good condition. We'll move north of here now, up this road, turn ourselves around to face south, and have a look at the remains of another magazine. You can't see it actually because it's in those woods, but it's the same roughly. But more importantly, here is the target wall of the Royal Arsenal's firing range. That's another one of the remnants, still there today and in very good condition indeed. I think it's back to the map now. So it is. Right, we've now covered the remnants, not in any detail, but at least you know roughly what they are, all the way up there. So we're doing quite well. The next remnant we're going to look at, I'm not going to identify. I can't identify it because it is private and it is hazardous. In fact, it's dangerous. You know, I'm not going to suggest anybody goes there, so I'm not going to suggest that you do, and I'm not going to identify the photographer either. I'm not going to encourage him. Oh, here we are. Right, what's this? It's a couple of magazines. Look rather good, don't they? They look rather original. I wonder what's going on inside there and also to the north of them. Let's have a quick look. Well, if you go inside there, you start to find all sorts of remnants. I wouldn't know, but I've heard about it. And anyway, here we are, a fire bucket and an old foam extinguisher there. And if you keep on looking around, nice big abutments there, which are holding the blast wall around the magazine. These are much bigger magazines than what you have further east. These are going to contain a great deal of high explosive, very dangerous potentially. And as we look around, we find within the woodwork more of this sort of thing. Plenty of nice mass concrete there. And in the ground, still find the very substantial foundations of that magazine, which of course was fed into the concrete crusher. But the foundations remain there. I suspect underneath the sand, the foundations of nearly every arsenal building is still there. I'm quite certain that the drainage pattern is still there, and I wouldn't even be surprised if the Royal Arsenal Railway is still there either. Which, strangely enough, is what can perhaps be found in this area that nobody can go to. I wonder what that is. That's odd, isn't it? Well, after our heroes have been digging around for quite a long time, look at this. Quite remarkable, isn't it? A real bit of industrial archaeology here, and it gets better. Not only is it standard gauge, it's mixed gauge, it's narrow gauge as well. And at the end of their faces are all fuzzed out. Oh well, never mind. At the end of the day, you end up with something like this. Quite a large amount of undergrowth closed, and at last, despite the exposure of the only railway line unearthed from the arsenal in very, very many years, complete with its mixed gauge fittings, 18-inch gauge and standard gauge at the same time. What a find, lovely. Just hope that area isn't going to be developed yet. If you go further into the undergrowth in this area, you come across another interesting remnant. It's a telegraph pole, and here's another view of it. Plenty of insulators on that. The arsenal had an enormous telephone system. It was a very, very early adopter of telephony. The telephone exchange is still there. It's in the Barclay Group redevelopment at the western end of the arsenal. It is now the only telegraph pole left in the whole Royal Arsenal site. The only one. Let's hope that stays up for a very long time. There are remnants of many other buildings in this area. A lot of them. All sorts of remnants can be found. Remains of a wash house, all sorts. Tremendous amount. Lots of railway sleepers. Anyway, I can't show you where that is, I'll tell you where it is, but what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little bit of good news. Not everything went into the concrete crusher quite. The GLC decided that they would preserve a little bit. And it's there. And after we've had a look at that, we'll go around out here, round the river, and then we'll make our way down to the canal. So let's have a look in there, see what it is. Well, that's what it would have looked like a long time ago. This is part of the composition factory. It might actually be part of quick firing cartridge ammunition factory number 4, which is not in the same area but had identical buildings. And unfortunately, the photograph from the Imperial War Museum does not say exactly where it was taken, but it might well be in the part that we want it to be. And you'll see lots of small buildings. Everybody's got to stay scrupulously clean, so all the walkways are raised up. Everybody is wearing clothing which will be washed at the end of every shift, and every new shift will put on new clothing afterwards. To transport the ammunition around, you've got bronze railway lines laid in here, so that there are no sparks between the wheels and the rails. One tiny little bit of this remains. It's the bit that actually made the crucial part of the high explosive, the nitration process. Not the bit where you fill the shell up with the finished material, but where you actually make the raw mixture of nitrated toluene or nitrated phenol. It's a very, very dangerous process. And this is what it looked like for a very, very long time. After the GLC had said they were going to preserve it, and the last time that they did was in about 1982, nothing much happened. The GLC didn't do anything, Tilfang Land didn't do anything, but nature did quite a lot. And gradually it sort of just disappeared into the undergrowth, like this. But then, all of a sudden, 3 months ago, something remarkable happened. The undergrowth is taken away. The trees are chopped down. Peabody Group are at work. Another view. Look at that. There's 2 blast walls there with the communications road running between the 2 of them. See an entrance there into one of the nitrating areas. This area is to be preserved. A very, very welcome and outside of the Barclay Homes area, pretty much unique example of people actually conserving the Royal Arsenal. A marvellous thing, very, very pleasing. It's a shame though that it was allowed to get into this state first. Right, up to the river we go, and here we find a very substantial remnant, a gun emplacement overlooking the River Thames at Tripcock Point. And it is a gun emplacement, it's not a pillbox. Its purpose is actually to hopefully destroy German E-boats as they come up the River Thames to lay mines. The chances of getting that far weren't very good, but if they had have come up this far, this might have got them. You never know. And if you go just around Tripcott Point, or Margaret Ness if you prefer, it's the same place. You come to this observation post. This, like the guarding place that we've just seen, was built in the late 1930s. Another view of this. The aim of this one actually is mainly for aircraft identification. It was felt that the Germans might fly up the river far enough to drop mines in the upper parts of the Thames, and this would have identified them doing it. There was another one of these to the left of it, but it slid down the hill into the foreshore and had to be demolished around about 5 years ago. Walking further down the Thames, we come to this large wooden structure here. Used to have a keel on the side of it. This large wooden structure is the Arsenal's gridiron. It did two purposes. Firstly, the Arsenal's fleet of boats could be put onto here for maintenance on occasions, and they could in fact be hauled up a ramp and out of the water altogether. Another purpose of it was that the roll-on, roll-off gun-carrying barges could, if necessary, be brought onto this, and the guns could be let down by winch into them, by rail. And here's a better view of it. It's getting on now. This will date from the 1880s or 1890s. Certainly no later than that, so it's a good survivor. And another survivor, just inside those woods on the left, is that they're the last place where you can see the Arsenal's original 8-foot-high palisade fencing. There's a tiny piece of it over by Crossness Pumping Station as well, but it's only about 3 foot long. Up here you get around about 100 foot of it, quite a lot. The electric fence on the top has disappeared though. Right, back to the map. Okay, we're now out to here. We've done all of this. We've still got to do this. So we're going to start off here. We're going to have a look at the Royal Arsenal's Canal and this hatched site here. There we are. Right, Royal Arsenal Canal, here we are, entrance lock here, canal here. The way the canal used to go here, and a modern slipway here. This area here is the Arsenal's former gasworks. Like all gasworks, there is a pollution problem, and so far nobody has bothered to tackle it. Unfortunately, no one's really bothered to tackle the canal either, because it's been filled up to about half of its depth and capped with concrete, and worst of all, there's never any water in it anymore. I suppose there are health and safety concerns. Let's have a closer look and have a look and see what it used to look like. There we are, that's the entrance lock in the glory days. This was in the early 50s when the swing bridge over the top was being rebuilt. The swing bridge itself, I think, dates from 1907. And was at one time a very, very important link between the east and the west. The original swing bridge up here dated from 1849, and it was the second railway swing bridge in the world. The oldest one, I believe, is at Norwich, and believe it or not, it's still in use. Right, Arsenal Canal in happier days, and Arsenal Canal, oh, the swing bridge again, sorry. There you are, that's a better view of it. There you are. It's actually off its trunnions at the moment. This is doing the refurbishment, a little bit earlier in the refurbishment. As you can see at this point, it's hand powered. That's the view today. You see that the canal lock is its original depth, but in the background it raises up. The canal isn't as deep as it originally was. There you can see the swing bridge off its trunnions again, sitting to the side. It's been off its trunnions since 1982. We'll see a better view of it in a moment. There we are. Right, that's the situation today. The reason, because it's off its trunnions, it's drooping down at one end. The Thamesmead authorities decided that one way perhaps to entice more people to move into Thamesmead and to build in Thamesmead was to build a railway line. It was going to be a miniature railway line, 15-inch gauge, and it was going to be effectively a branch of the Romney Hythe and Dymchurch Railway on the Romney Marsh. They were going to run it, and the contract was within, very, very close to being signed. Very, very nearly happened. An enormous amount of money was spent on the project, and the plans are detailed down to the last inch. As part of that, this swing bridge was completely refurbished and given a new hydraulic drive system. With the end of the GLC in 1988, enthusiasm went. Nobody seemed to want Thamesmead anymore, and the idea died. And so underneath there somewhere is a completely unused, brand new drive system for that Grade 2 listed swing bridge. The whole area here is all listed Grade 2. There is talk at the moment of the possibility of filling in the canal. Peabody have said this, but it's only one of various proposals, and I don't think they do it. I really don't. They'll have a fight on their hands if they do. Another view here, up the now almost dry canal. It's been raining, as you can see, so there's a little bit of water there. One more. Last time I was here, actually, it's been quite a few months since I have been, but there was a very tasteful purple three-piece suite just about there. You could have had that. I didn't have a vehicle with me at the time, so I had to leave it. Right. Okay, back to the map. Now we've got done all of this now. All of this. So now we come to this little bit here. Let's have a quick look at it. There you are. That's an aerial photograph, and you see two things. You see building E81. E81 here and E81A down there. That building, well, the site there had been E80. This was quick-firing cartridge ammunition factory number 1. It's a First World War construction mainly. And this building here was the Army Ordnance Department's warehouse. It would have been full of high explosive at one stage. The other quick-firing cartridge ammunition factories were in this area. The really big one, number 4, was just up there, and there was a railway down here to bring everything in. Now these buildings here, we're not going to bother having a close look at them because they've been reclad in modern coated steel. But the outline of them, I've checked on every conceivable map, is literally exactly that of the original building. So I'm convinced that that concrete, that steel cladding is over the original structure, and these are original arsenal buildings. Building Z165 roughly, a few either side. But here we've got this large factory which did get bombed during the Second World War, was immediately rebuilt, and includes the lacquering shop down here, which had a tremendous history to it. Let's have a quick look. There's the lacquer shop with the other buildings in the background. The lacquer shop was important because at the end of the First World War, every single person who'd fallen during that war had their relatives given a personalised bronze plaque, sometimes cruelly known as a dead man's penny. And this was the last place they were in before they were dispatched, because it was here that they were lacquered. So almost every one of them. So it's an important little link with the First World War, but unfortunately it wasn't listed. And as a result, last year, the whole lot went. Every bit of it. So the old AOD warehouse is still there, but all this completely gone. Really sad. Great loss. Right, okay, we're going to stay on our bus and we're going to turn right and we're going to go into Plumstead Road and make our way towards the main part of the arsenal. And we come to this, Middlegate House. Middlegate House, quite old really. In fact, I've got the date and I'm going to get it because it's about time I checked up my notes. I haven't read them for ages. My word, I'm going fast, aren't I? Gosh, I'm wasting time. I haven't got time to waste. Right, there we go, here we go, nearly there. Middlegate House, building C96 is 1843, and let's have a better look at it. There we are, and the gates in front of it are 1846. It's originally called the Plumstead Gate. The gates are now closed. There are lots of photographs, postcards of people pouring in and out of these. Now we move further along the dual carriageway. As the dual carriageway approaches Woolwich, in order to make its way forward, it's had to go actually within the arsenal and demolish quite a few buildings. This might seem like a terrible loss, but the alternative might have been worse. The alternative was to run this road, this major road, Plumstead Road, along the riverfront. and it very nearly happened. It was going to be on stilts. It would have been running within a matter of feet at the side of the Greenwich Heritage Centre, if you've ever been in there. I think perhaps this is probably the lesser of two evils. This is what you would have seen at the end of the Arsenal. Well, this is pretty much what Barclays bought after the Arsenal closed. Middlegate House is visible in this. It's that little blob there. Most of the buildings here are still here. Those aren't. Those aren't. That isn't. That green one there isn't there either. Just about everything else you see here is still with us today. And we're going to go into the Arsenal and we're going to look around them. These are really the historic parts. One more view of this from the riverside. Here we are. This is Royal Arsenal West, the package that was handed over through English partnerships to Barclay Group. And notice here, sand. Loads of sand with houses being built on top of it. So there you are, that's part of the Thamesmead development. That was part of the GLC's land. Now, nothing like sand. Have anybody got any buckets and spades, you know where to go. It's Thamesmead. Thamesmead Riviera. Right, some buildings here disappeared in this view. That one, the modern power station, the modern heating plant, that disappeared, and so did that building there. That was a building that was used for testing vehicles against the imperviousness to all sorts of things, including nuclear, biological and chemical warfare. So rather happily that's not there anymore. Just about everything else is still there, but not that building, not the shipping shed. That's gone. That's a shame. This shows our route that we're going to take through the historic buildings of the western core of the Royal Arsenal. This is the oldest part of the Royal Arsenal. There are many fine buildings in here. Our tour is now mainly architectural. This is the main gatehouse, just down here. And the road runs through the Arsenal behind it. So the gatehouse is now severed. It's now isolated from the rest of the site. We'll then take this route to get us around all of the buildings. The only buildings that we will not see are this building here, which is not particularly thrilling. Well, it's thrilling to me, but it's a business centre. It's a business centre, and two buildings that I really should have bought photographs of, but unfortunately I have only one, and it's not very good. These two buildings here, just in here, here, which are full-scale erecting shops with very large cranes in them. And they remain today as the Royal Ordnance Factory left them. They, I hope, will be around for very much longer. At the moment, Barclays use this one for storage, mainly of building materials for the area they're rebuilding here with modern blocks. And this building here is used, the only use of it, in fact, is the occasional Woolwich Farmers Market. We'll see everything else. And we'll start off with that main gate, and then across the road into here. The main gate. There are numerous photographs of the main gate. It's obviously the most photographed place in the Arsenal because it's the only place that you really could photograph of the Arsenal. You couldn't get in. You weren't allowed to photograph in there. You would have ended up in prison if you did. So anyway, that's what it used to look like. And this is what it looks like today. Worth giving the dates. I'm going to keep this in front of me now because I want these dates to be accurate. The main gate, as you see it today, was completed in 1891. But the original piers of the original gate are quite possibly in here. Just these bits here. And that goes back time immemorial, very, very long time, since the Arsenal began perhaps. That's several hundred years. We'll go around this and we're going to cross over the main road that's been sent straight through the Arsenal. And this is what we would have seen if that main road hadn't been built. This is part of Avenue H. This is what was lost when the main road was built. These buildings were accommodation for officers and also senior staff within the Arsenal, the management. Very attractive row of buildings. Early Victorian, perhaps in some cases a little earlier than that. A real loss. They also included such things as the Arsenal's morgue, the Arsenal's surgery and the Arsenal's theatre. Very nice garden as well. all sadly lost underneath that road in the early 1980s. So we cross the road, we go through the current gates, and we see this. To our left, the Royal Brass Foundry. To our right, what's now the Dial Arch Public House, stretching right across it. These colour photographs you'll be seeing from now on are very recent, and they were taken by Barclays for the original presentation. Turning to our right, we see Verbruggen's house. This was built for Jan and Peter Verbruggen, the Arsenal's second master gun makers. 1773. The predecessor, RAH, the first master gun maker, got there a lot earlier, got there in 1717. The great thing about Jan and Peter Verbruggen is that one of them, and I think it was Jan Verbruggen, was a magnificent artist, a superb draftsman. It's hard, looking at his work, it's hard to realise that he wasn't actually using a camera to take the images. Tremendous work. And he depicted every single aspect of work in the Royal Arsenal, every single aspect of it at that time. They're very, very important paintings. They're now in the National Museum of the Netherlands. Right, immediately to our left, we will see the guardhouse. The guardhouse is seen here to good effect in the early 1970s. It hasn't changed at all, really. That's as it was in 2014. There has been an alteration since then. A large glass box has appeared here. And the reason that there is a large glass box is that this has just become a pub. It's only been open for about 2 months. It's called the Guardhouse, belongs to Young's, and the glass box is a restaurant. And I'm told it's very expensive. Even more expensive than the Dial Arch. But mind you, you get what you pay for. I've got no objections. It's very good. I treated to lunch in the Dial Arch not long ago. It was absolutely wonderful. Really good. Right, let's move on. Here we are, the star of the show. There are only 3 Grade 1 listed industrial buildings in South East London. Tower Bridge, Crossness Pumping Station, and this, the Royal Brass Foundry. Built in 1717, it's attributed to Sir John Vanbrugh. And except for the coupler on the roof, it's exactly the same as it was when it was built. That's a later addition. It can't all have been Vanbrugh. This was a factory. It was a factory working at the very limits of technology of its day. It must have been designed largely, at least in part, certainly, by Andreas Schauch, the first of the master gun makers. And there it is, in an earlier era. This is actually 1885, hasn't changed a bit, and you can see a little engine rolling around the corner for us. Walking further on, we see the Dial Arch, or as it used to be called, Dial Square, or sometimes called the Great Pile of Buildings. It was built between 1717 and 1720, and it's attributed to Sir Nicholas Hawksmoor, who was Christopher Wren's Clerk of Works. It was a quadrangle. 3 sides of the quadrangle have gone. This side remains. It's not listed. There's not enough left of the original for that. Very historic building nonetheless, and again, Schauch would have had a lot to do with this because it contained absolutely state-of-the-art engineering equipment for turning those brass gun barrels, smoothing them off, getting them ready for a service. It was driven by a central horse drum in the middle of the quadrangle, and all the drive was transmitted by shafts through bevel gears, which were all underground in little brick tunnels. Very advanced thinking for its day. There's another view in its later days with the military. Unfortunately, it's looking a little bit worse for wear there, but eventually it was fully restored. Here it is as it is today. There is unfortunately a modern block of flats behind it, which might or might not fit it, but I do know some people who live in there, and they say it's a very, very good place to live. Let's look inside. Very nice. Young spent over £1 million fitting this place out, and it looks like it. It's a great pub. I can't criticise it actually. But when you sit in the Dial Arch, what are you sitting on top of? The Museum of London did an exploration in this area, some really serious archaeology, not just in front of the building here, but all the way around it, and other parts as well. And what they found was a very large number of graves. It's a Roman graveyard. That's what it is. That's what was there first, long before the arsenal got there. Right, let's continue on our little trip going northwards, and we would have seen this sorry remnant here. One of the two pavilions of New Laboratory Square, built in 1696. Let's have a look at a slightly later period. This is after Barclays had moved in. It's now, no it's not, it's just before the army, just before the military sold it. You can see it's now really falling to bits. It's not in too good condition at all, but things do improve. This is what it looks like now. You can't actually go into it at the moment because there's a hoarding in front of it. When the area between the two pavilions, the other one is behind this, was roofed over in 1854, it became the largest machine shop factory floor in the world. Had no rival. Both 1696, they are the oldest industrial buildings, purpose-built industrial buildings in the Greater London area, I believe. Not absolutely certain on that, I stand to be corrected. We're going to turn right.
Malcolm Tucker says they are.
They are. Then it is. Thank you very much. Thank you. We turn to our right and we see the northern side of the Royal Carriage Department, which was built between 1802 and 1804. And behind it, this big serrated top up there, made out of corrugated iron. Today, it looks like this. The corrugated iron has been replicated by flat metallic surfaces. The rest of the building has been restored, partially as a gymnasium and partially as small houses as part of Barclay Homes redevelopment. We'll turn up that road there and have a look at the other end of it. Gives us a better view. Here we are again. We can see this great big corrugated iron appendage on the roof. The reason that is there is because when it was built, this building was mainly interested in woodwork, gun carriages, cartwheels, that sort of thing. This sort of thing really was out of favour by the end of the First World War, and so in the mid-1930s it was converted into a machine shop, general purpose assembly area, and that required the use of a series of very large gantry cranes. These needed to be covered up, and that is their covering. That's why it's there today. And that's the same view today, with that grey corrugated iron replaced by grey steel-clad buildings. Right, I think it's time to take our bearings after we've seen this building. Here again is the Royal Carriage Department, this time from the front with its rather nice clock. The clock was sadly very badly vandalised some years ago, but Barclays spent a fortune with the firm in Bradford restoring it. Here is the view today. The clock is now working again. It's no longer worked by two weights going down into wells beneath it. They again prove that this is a marsh. Those wells were full of water. It's now electrically powered. Let's have a look inside it. And there you are, those are the giant crane runs inside that big corrugated iron box. They here have got brick air raid precaution works. That's what they are, to try and protect the area just in case it gets bombed. And now a look at what it's like today. There we are. Not so bad, perhaps. Okay, let's go outside and take our bearings. We've now arrived here. That's where we are. So we're just about halfway through. Don't worry, it won't take long. Right, we turn around. Here we are, building C1. For my money, the finest surviving industrial building in the Royal Arsenal. Built in 1886. It was built very rapidly because its predecessor fell down. It fell down due to weight of snow on the roof, and the Illustrated London News caught the scene. Here we are, crane runs within, very similar to the ones that are there today, lots of corrugated iron lying all over the place. Let's go inside the current building. This building is magnificent. It's still got its cranes. The cranes aren't visible in this shop. Well, just one about there. 5-ton direct current power. There is currently no electricity in the building, so there is no lighting anymore. It's also been shot blasted on the inside, so all the brick is now nice, clean London stock brick, but the crane runs and all the metallic components and the roof are still in their original finish. One more from in here. Here we are again. I would suspect that these colours might easily be the colours that the building was built with. It is a wonderful building, it really is. And at the moment, I asked somebody from Barclays quite recently what they thought they might do with it. They didn't seem particularly certain. They were thoughts for cinema, perhaps. But thankfully, it doesn't look as if it's going to be converted into housing. Make a good museum, wouldn't it? Right, turn around. The central offices, 1903 to 1910. Still there today, but now with the addition of an extra 3 stories. And we'll go around the other side of it now. Very similar. Nice 86-inch wheelbase Series 1 Land Rover. And over there, on the right-hand side, a rather ornate and special-looking building. We know that this photograph must have been taken after about 1970, because the building that was here has gone. We'll show you just about what came after it. There we are, that's it, the Shell Foundry Gates. Very, very attractive little building. Designed in 1856. And the gentleman who decided it wasn't an architect, he was an engineer. Let's get his name. Determined to have it. Can't find it. Oh no. Fails again. Here we go. I really should remember this. It's David Murray. David Murray, because he did so much work in the Arsenal. Should have known that. I've given walks around the Arsenal, never had to refer to any notes. The building behind it, the Shell Foundry, was demolished. All that was left was this. There's the last remaining little bit of the Shell Foundry there. The building behind it is the Royal Air Force's Secure Signals Unit, a very, very secure building, very, very highly confidential work. That transferred there from RAF Kidbrooke in around about 1970-71, something like that. Better look at it. There you go, it's got its original gates back. The gates were originally taken to Royal Ordnance Factory Patrickcroft in Lancashire when the Arsenal closed down, but thankfully the Arsenal's last chief superintendent, Sir Sidney Bacon, managed to get them back. In return, there is a plaque to ROF Patrickcroft on the floor just inside. Quite a large piece, nice piece of ironwork actually, that. And this is the inside. That's it, the plaque to ROF Patrickcroft that thanks them for looking after those gates is just there. This is the foyer, this is now a block of flats. And this is what the block of flats looks like inside. This is fairly typical of the sort of work that Barclays do. And another one of this. There we are, not bad. I'll give them a £5. Okay, we're on top of the central offices now, and we're looking down on the Shell Foundry Gates here, and this is the beginning of the work that Barclays did. This gives you some indication of the amount of infrastructure that had to go into the western part of the Arsenal to turn it into a residential area. Whilst an awful lot of people worked here, they didn't all have washing machines, they didn't have dishwashers, they probably didn't have showers. So you need an awful lot of drainage. Tremendous amount of money went into this when it was rebuilt, and I'm not absolutely certain that Barclays would have made a profit out of it yet, but they would have done in the end. Okay, outside we come to this magnificent building. This is the Grand Store of 1802 to 1804. A wonderful building. It is reckoned to be the finest Georgian warehouse in the British Isles. It may well be the best one in the world. It is now all residential, and it proves that this area is a marsh. There are actually quite significant cracks in the outside of the building, which have now all been filled up, but if you look at it carefully you can see that it's like this in places. It's actually floating away quite nicely. The trees are very old. There's photographs of those trees taken in the late 1870s, and they are the same ones. They used to line this side of the road as well, but they were removed for the extension of the Royal Arsenal Railway when it went over to standard gauge in this area. I'm going to tell you who did that. Oh, who is it? It's... I don't know. I don't know who did it. I didn't write it down. Okay, well, let's go on anyway. Here's the other end of it. Here we are. One of the end pavilions. There was another one of these here. It was demolished to make way for the Arsenal's power station in 1907. If you go inside it, that's what it used to look like. It is a three-sided quadrangle. With Victorian infill. These buildings here, these two buildings here, actually only date from 1890, but they are still there today, and they too have become residential. And this is the view today.
James Wyatt and
James Wyatt
and his nephew.
Yes, good. Thank you, James Wyatt. Right, good. I should have remembered that, but I just had so much to absorb when I was putting this together earlier. I just can't remember all of it. Right, okay. We're going to go back and have a look at where what was the power station. No, we're not. We're going to have a look at the Armstrong Gun Factory. The Armstrong Gun Factory. This is just opposite where we were. This was designed by David Murray as well. It was designed for the manufacture of a revolutionary new type of gun, designed by Sir William Armstrong. It was a wrought iron prefabricated gun. It allowed very much larger guns to be made than with cast iron, and very much larger charges of propellant to be put inside them. It's got a remarkable survivor on the side of it, the last of the Royal Arsenal's emergency telephones. There would have been hundreds of these at one time. It's still here, the police, fire and ambulance telephone, and up at the top it's still got its little blue light bulb, which presumably flashed when somebody made a phone call. Turn around. Oh no, we don't. Here we are, Armstrong Gun. That's an Armstrong gun in front of the Armstrong Gun Factory. Very nicely posed photograph, that. Very well-known one. Apologies if you've seen it before. Right, now we will turn around and we see what was there. The Arsenal's power station of 1907, and in front of it building some very typical Board of Ordnance prefabricated ironwork construction. Now this was way after the Board of Ordnance had gone. That went in 1855, but it was such a good form of construction it continued to be used for a very long time. The Arsenal had acres of it. There's not very much of it left now. We'll see it later on. That's what it looks like today. Not so much fun, eh? But again, I'm told by people who live in it, a very nice place to live. And that's the interior of it, its own pool. And we'll go round onto the riverside, which it faces over. And here we see, beaming out over the River Thames to tell everybody how important this establishment is, Oil, Arsenal, but don't worry, I checked, the light bulb had gone, or the lighting had gone, and they had to take the R down, just when I was taking the photograph of it. But anyway, it's back now. Right, we're going to now walk along the Thames, along the Thames towards the Greenwich Heritage Centre. And I just had to show you this, a photograph taken at roughly this point, from no idea when, but a very, very long time ago. And there you are, the Arsenal in the days of cast iron guns, cannonballs and whatever. A real blast from the past. Let's keep going. Right, this building, right at the other end of the grand store, it's got on top of it a hydraulic accumulator tower. And here we see it, after the Arsenal was closed to manufacturing, being rebuilt on the top floor as a social club. The building to the right, pretty modern construction as you can see. That will play a part in the story of this building as we will see. This is what it looks like now. The modern top has gone, been replaced by something even more modern. And the building at the right has gone. But, or has it? Going inside that building that's demolished, we see that it's made out of lots of cast iron columns, very fireproof building, very strong building, not for some reason or another suitable for conversion into accommodation. And here is the interior on the exterior. The hydraulic tower is just here, and these now form the original interior of the other building now forms an access into this building here. A nice reuse of old materials. Back along the riverfront, here's the shipping shed on the left, the last one of the two shipping sheds by this time. Here's one of the little guard houses, I think they're about 1816. and behind it the building that is now the Greenwich Heritage Centre. It was originally New Laboratory Square. These have gone. Now these have gone, but they are very, very well recorded from the point of view of industrial archaeology. That information is held in the London Metropolitan Archives, and I feel that the reason for that might be was that this is where the motorway was going to go, and therefore the GLC did a particularly good job recording the interior of that. Had some good hydraulic cranes and hoists inside it, sadly no longer with us. That's the same view today, a little bit prettier perhaps, with the Arsenal's new pier. Underneath that pier is the original Watergate area, still got Georgian stone steps on the riverside of the wall. New Laboratory Square, the building which most people will now know as part of Firepower and part of the Greenwich Heritage Centre. The Mock Tudor extension dates from the 1920s. The rest of the building was built over an immensely long period of time. It was started in 1810, and the two sides that you can see here, the north and east ranges, both do date from 1810. But the rest of the building wasn't finally completed until something like 1890. It took a very long period. During the First World War, this was used mainly as a bullet factory. It was also used as a carpenter's. There used to be a chimney in the middle of it, and there was a printing shop just behind. That's the view today. The railway line in the foreground has gone. The little guardhouses for the Watergate are still there. Not entirely unpleasant. We'll now walk up here, back towards the main gates. In fact, you can just see the cupola of the all brass foundry there, so we know we're nearly back. Turning around, looking back at this building, you can see why sometimes it's called the pedimental building, because of the pediment on the top. You can see here various 20th century accretions on the outside of it, which have now gone. That's the view today, and here we see some of the Board of Ordnance's rather pleasant prefabricated construction here. It's very, very practical and pleasant type of iron frame building. Whether the tank will stay after Firepower goes, I do not know. It's not a tank actually, it's a self-propelled gun, but mustn't split hairs. Here we go. Right, the last building we'll be looking at today. This is the, originally, Tower Place, the mansion that owned this area. And it was knocked down and rebuilt by Sir Nicholas Hawksmoor, possibly on the original foundations. Can't be certain about that, but it is nonetheless a very old building, a very important building, and that building to the right, the ground floor over there, which you can't see here because of this thing, was once the boardroom of the Royal Laboratory, one of the three great departments of the Royal Arsenal. That building there, that room there rather, that room, all on its own, was the Royal Military Academy. It's a little bit bigger than that now. Here we are, today's view. The accretions have gone. The building is now much more clearly visible. I must say that I've never liked it. It doesn't look like Hawksmoor to me. I know that he did it. A lot of people thought it was Vanbrugh at first, but it's now proven to be Hawksmoor. But it's a very strong building, isn't it? It doesn't have any delicacy about the thing at all. I really ought to tell you when that was built, and I should know this again. It's going to be about 1720, and it was 1720. I'm amazed. I was right. Okay, one more view of this. There we are, 1885. What's now the Greenwich Heritage Centre with its nice cast iron fabricated structure is still there. Another very similar building is over here, but an even better one. It's got a very nice ornamental frieze along the top of it. It's a very highly posed photograph taken for the Royal Laboratory Department. I don't know why they did it. I think they really wanted to show off that railway locomotive. Right. Oh dear, I must nearly be at the end. I think I am. Now, we've got a railway locomotive in front of Tower Place, which is what everybody still calls it. And there's another one. Who's that? Anybody recognise that person? Well, I recognise that person, but I'm looking in the opposite direction, so it's easy for me. That's one of the Arsenal's former locomotives. It's called Woolwich. It's currently at Crossness Pumping Station being restored. This is in 2011. And just to finish off with, my word, what's happened to the colour? It's all easy. I don't know what colour it is now, but it wasn't supposed to be that colour anyway. Right, we've got to the end. We've got right through all the remnants of the Royal Arsenal. Maybe this surviving locomotive represents the future. There's actually a lot of equipment lying around the country in all sorts of places from the old Royal Arsenal Railway. This is probably the most famous example. The Royal Arsenal has closed its doors when firepower goes for possibly the first time in nearly 500 years. There will be no military presence in the Royal Arsenal. But the Royal Arsenal, of course, did not absolutely disappear. It never became close to disappearing. It actually got stronger because it has spawned two great companies, Royal Ordnance Factories and what's now called Kinetic plc, which is the Arsenal's Research and Development Department in part. The Arsenal was one of its foundations. The Royal Ordnance Factories are now part of British Aerospace, and they're called Global Land Combat Systems. Not that long ago, Global Land Combat Systems actually decided to give a home to the archive of the Royal Arsenal Woolwich Historical Society, and the people from the highly secret and unmentionable armaments factory that they're employed at were absolutely thrilled. There is no two ways about it. They still consider themselves to be Arsenal employees, even though they work a long way from here. And very tellingly, during the First World War, the Royal Arsenal produced 1.6 billion rounds of small arms ammunition. At the beginning of the First World War, it was the only source of small arms ammunition for the whole British Empire. One of the many Royal Ordnance factories that the Royal Arsenal designed in-house in 1916 was at Radway Green in Cheshire. Radway Green is now the world leader in the manufacture of military small arms ammunition, and by a significant margin. It was completely rebuilt a couple of years ago, and the new building was reopened by the Princess Royal. As he was introducing her, the managing director of that factory started with the words, "We came from the Woolwich Arsenal," which I thought was really quite appropriate. And now we are going to leave the Royal Arsenal. There is the outside of the gatehouse and its plaque, or just its plaque. It carries the arms of the Board of Ordnance and a very, very appropriate motto indeed. Sua Tila Tonanti, to the warrior arms. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for putting up with me.